Welcome back to episode 24. It is a race weekend. I mean, I guess last weekend was a race weekend for other dirt bikes around the world, but here in the United States, it seems like it was an off weekend. And so we're going to talk about Supercross. We're going to talk about Tomac being the United States' last hope to try to dethrone what's going on with Jet. And, could it be Sexton? Could it be somebody else? And we're going to dive into some other deals because just off the top of my head live, I want to talk a little bit about privateers and where the sport is on stuff where, some of my background with the cryptocurrency stuff where I feel there's some need to change. Then we'll have some more fun stuff. But hey, my buddy and co-host, Coach Rob Beams, he is so close to 23,000 subscribers. I want you to go over to his channel, look at the link in the description right now, and get him over that landmark. And Coach, he is actually somewhat on vacation here, but I had to be like, dude, you're at the beach, but come on, come do the show. People miss you.
Hey, good morning, man. And I want to apologize for everybody for last week. I not to get on a soapbox here. I left Orlando last week at 5 a.m. with a 3-hour drive and got here at 8 o'clock and was going to set up studio and only found out that the people who were here the night before for the week before us, they didn't check out. And so I texted you and I apologize. I said I was trying to find a place to set up, but here in a beach environment, everything is open air and not the most conducive for a podcast. And obviously I'm a big fan of the show, so I went back and watched it. It was a great one. So congrats, but I apologize. And for those that were asking where I was at, deeply appreciated. It's good
Coach,
to be back.
You never have to apologize. Ever. We do this stuff because we love it, and it's a live show, so it creates some dynamic here. And I had a guest that was scheduled, Matt Moss, who's a couple-time champion, I believe in 13 and 14 for the Australian stuff. And he just got a new ride with Gas. And so he wanted to share some stuff, but unfortunately it's like midnight there. And I think he may have fallen asleep. So, that's kind of how the cookie crumbles. Sometimes I had some other riders that were planned to come on, but man, sometimes just lack of a weird terminology, it feels as if like herding cattle on some stuff. And I don't mean to sound negative, because guys in the chat, if you ever need to tell me to shut the F up, please, by all means, that's what this show is for. Coach knows this as well. However, sometimes I feel, why do I want to try to build a business in this industry when the people that are already established, they've got a pretty good grasp on the sport, and they've got the accolades to back it up. And I know I'm a huge successor to the privateers, but there's something to be said for the rule and the exception. And the exception is very far in between. I mean, if I'm talking about privateers that are the exception, I'm talking about guys like Kevin Moran's, Tristan Lane, these guys that have good programs built up, and they just work and work and work, and they understand it's a business, And so a few years ago, when I was getting all the privateers together, I mean, collectively, Rob, you were helping, and it's trying to get stuff to happen, and it never happens because it's Coach, maybe you can better explain this, but I don't want to say brainwashing, but it's the consensus that if you can twist the throttle and, you're somewhat of a professional, things will be easier for you. And number one, that's not how life is. And I know I was thinking that as well as a kid, where it was like the factory guys, they get everything so nice. They get a red carpet ride, they get all sorts of stuff. But the thing that we're leaving out is what social media shows, and what the lack of behind the scenes show is that these guys work their effing ass off. It doesn't happen by mistake, because there's so many riders out there that have the talent as a Kenny Roxon or a Chase Sexton kind of a thing. But it's people do what others are unwilling to do. And that is what made those guys successful. And when I talk to a lot of privateers, I ask them, I'm like, what are you guys willing to do that's better than the other guys. And they're like, oh, I'm just going to ride. I'm just going to ride. I'm like, that's not enough, right? That's not enough. You need to go bang down doors and get good people behind you. Again, Kevin Moran's is a perfect example. Jeff Walker is another amazing example. Like, the dude is fast on a bike. He knows how to freaking twist the throttle, but arguably he's just as good as editing videos and making content that creates the dynamic of, hey, come support me, because um, let's face it, that most privateers don't have factory rides just breathing down their neck that want,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely. No, you're exactly right, Johnny. And if you don't mind me elaborating on your thread of thought, when we say that we like to support athletes, we sponsor a tremendous amount of athletes in all of our verticals of business. We have to, as a sponsored athlete, you have to recognize the idea that we as a business, we have the opportunity to advertise anywhere, and we're always evaluating the return on that investment. What I think is so interesting with social media is you think it would be easier for people to become, and I hate to use the word influencers because that word's a little bit adulterated in the sport, but for any company to spend money supporting an athlete, the athlete needs to realize that their job now becomes marketer of that sponsor. And for some weird reason, it's like as the capability levels go up, as the results go up, there's this higher level of arrogancy that goes with it that says, well, because I'm so and so, because I'm getting incrementally better, I can do less and less for those athletes because for those sponsors, because they should feel grateful that they could put their logo on me. You're extremely wrong. I can't even begin to tell you how wrong you are. There's plenty of money out there. I mean, I have my own entrepreneur group. I encourage athletes to start businesses all the time. Owning your own business is fun. It's a challenge, but it's just like any other thing that you try to do athletically. Being able to overcome the adversity and be successful despite all the odds, that's what makes it fun. Same thing with athletic capabilities. The problem that we run into, though, is you would think with social media it would be easier to be able to promote somebody else's brand. And I'm not into, like, I don't like the way Monster Energy and Star Yamaha, you can see it's in their contract where no matter what JT Money is saying on the podium, those guys are mandated that they've got to squeeze in the list of sponsors. And all of us have noticed it. All of us talk about it. None of us like it. And it's a shame because the athletes look really silly because JT Money could be asking them could be asking a question, and you could tell they're just quickly trying to answer it so that they can have enough time to divert and go down their diatribe of sponsors that they must say. Just like if you've noticed there's a new trend, everybody must drink out of their energy drink. Even though the can is empty, you can see that they're doing the artificial swallow. You can see where there's just it's kind of like when you watch the news and you can see that there's a narrative that gets put out. And if you go to all the different channels, you hear the same punchlines. Well, you can see the same thing with the teens. You must drink from the drink. The drink is empty, but yet everybody has to make sure it's turned towards it. Does that make you buy the energy drink? No. And so this is where, if you bring your original statement back full circle, Johnny, we love to help athletes. We've done it ever since day one. And the one thing that I want to be very clear is I'm not saying that I want people to go up there and do nothing but say complete racing solutions 33 times in a minute. That's the last thing I want. What I want is somebody that when they receive a product or when they're legitimately using a product, help the end user understand what that product does for you. And if you just kind of stay only focused on that, every single privateer, if you were to embrace the idea that if somebody helps you, how is that product or service helping you? It helps the people that I'm trying to market to. I'm not trying to sell anything. Please understand, I'm not trying to sell anything. I want there to be an understanding of what we do. There's a huge difference. So, yeah, sponsorship money is out there quite a bit, and I find it interesting because Johnny, remember back when you first started racing, you'd go into the Motocross Action magazine, you'd get the address for DG Pipes, you'd write a letter, and you'd put a resume in there, and you'd lick it, stamp it, and just wait anxiously to get some kind of a response. Usually, it was a "Dear John, sorry, we've met our budget for the year, and we can't help you." But you shook the bushes, and you sent a lot of letters out. Now with social media, you can DM people. it's interesting. It's like the easier the platforms become to do something, less and less is being done to get it done. And I just think it's interesting.
That's a good segue to like why these things, pretty much all of technology was designed to make things easier for you, like the difference between emails to snail mailing. But because of that, now it's ignored, because how many emails do you get? Where if
Yep.
you used to get a letter in the mail, you were like, hey, I have to write back to this person
Hmm.
because it's important. They took time out of their day to go stamp it, go walk out there, mail it. But now you get a little text message. And unfortunately, I'm guilty. Like I have 170 text messages that are unread right here, and it's rude. It's just rude of me that I haven't got back. And so, but it's not just the privateers. I mean, it is the whole community of moto where. Okay, I'm going to use the example because I've got my other crypto YouTube channel that, quite honestly, sometimes I still feel like I should be doing most of my time on that, as far as a reward versus this stuff. But I just enjoy motocross and supercross and just dirt bikes way more, because at the end of the day, it's almost like there's a quote from Jeff Bezos that says, if you're doing something that you enjoy doing at least 50% of the time, then you're more successful than 99% of the people, right? And I just get more
100%.
enjoyment out of this stuff. But sometimes I feel resistant to where the future is for stuff like this because I get frustrated at the community. And what I'm saying is just even the companies, like the whole dynamic is that, hey, if we offer something to a rider, they should be happy that we're offering it to them, whether it's a gear company or parts or something. There is, once kind of money gets involved, they're like, nope. If you don't want to do it for free for me, I'll find somebody that will do it for free. And that's the same thing when we talk about the whole racing stuff, where let's just say riders went on strike because they wanted more money and blah, 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 because you've got riders like AP now talking about it, AC talking about it, Marvin Muscan talking about, like, there's a lot of bigger guys that are talking about money now, right? It's not just the poor guy at the bottom of the totem pole going, oh, I'm not making anything. But my point is, if they don't want to race for what the prize money is right now, there is thousands of people lined up that will do it for free, that just want to be in the show. And it's so hard to try to crack that ideology of we can be better than this, and a rising tide lifts all ships. So I guess to bring it back to my other crypto world is those guys are all about money. So the conversation doesn't start without money, right? And here in motocross, the conversations stay far, far away from anything to do with money. And it's not just the riders, it's all the companies that are making moto products, like everything. I've had probably 4 meetings with um, companies that are making products for the sport, and every single one of them kind of go the same direction. And it's so ironic that it makes perfect sense.
Hmm. This is why I encourage all my young athletes to seek out the guidance of an agent. And it's interesting because there are a couple teams that have a no agent policy, believe it or not. Now stop and think about, why would a team have a no agent policy? Well, because they know, and this is a bunch of double negatives. So Johnny, if I convolute it, please untangle my mess. If a team knows that the rider doesn't know what the going price of his services are, you're never going to get the going price. You're always going to get undersold. That's just common sense. It's just like, Johnny, you're good on the automobile side of things. You do a lot of due diligence before you go out and you buy your vehicles. So if you go in there and you're educated, what is it that you're able to do on the negotiation of that bike, or excuse me, on that truck? You're able to get it down into realistic terms very quickly. But what do the dealerships hope and pray? That you come in, you just wrecked your car, you have no knowledge, you just need to get a car quick. That's what they want to bank on. That's what the industry, unfortunately, if you read the contract for an outdoor national, it literally says that you are giving the opportunity to be part of a prestigious series. You're going to pay $100,000 for the right to host an outdoor national but it literally says in writing that you are giving, even though you're paying, you're being given the opportunity to be part of history. That's how distorted the message is. Now, that's not to dig on outdoor nationals. That's not to dig on any of these teams. If an agent can go in, and I found this out the hard way, I didn't realize this. I was not aware, and maybe it was an assumption that I shouldn't have made. If you win a championship for an OEM, you don't get that championship bike. Now, if the agent has put that in the contract, then yes, you get your bike. Now, I would have thought, and again, wrong assumption, right? I know that bike costs money, but you just won a championship for that OEM. I always just assumed that that was what they would do to say thank you. There's nothing like that whatsoever. When you look at the idea that we have a group of riders that are willing to go race for free, and you've got promoters that have created a narrative where you need to be thankful that we're giving you a platform so that you can fill up our seats so that we can make money. But we're going to tell you that we're giving you the incredible opportunity and privilege to race. That's a
That's just
mind.
good business, though, Coach.
Well, is it good business or is it manipulation? Because you're
Well,
never going to see Major League Baseball, ice hockey, football. And again, this isn't about comparing us to ball and stick sports in regards to sheer numbers, just in
why
regards to
not?
the
I mean,
business
that's
model.
that's that's where we want to be.
Well, people always say, Rob, you can't compare moto to basketball because it costs you $12 to buy a basketball and it costs you 12 grand to buy a motorcycle. It's the same argument that we've had, not so much an argument, but a debate we've had on this show before. When I say I don't agree with that mindset where people say, well, I don't own a Formula race car, but yet millions of people go to Formula One racing. Whenever we try to compare the growth of our sport and we compare it to something else, a perfect example is the prize money in a golf tournament. We have the Masters going on at Augusta right now. I don't know what the prize purse is for it, but it's probably 15, $20 million. And people say, yeah, but there's a million golf courses and there's only 12,000 racetracks. But yet we don't own you and I don't own a Formula One race car, but yet Formula One is successful. So that ideology, again, it goes back to how are we approaching this as a business?
My point is like, steal like an artist. Let's take the best of what other people have done, corporations, and let's turn it into the sport. And the sport is making changes, but it's because there's a little bit of pushback from, like I said, World Supercross and some of the riders. And, anytime you talk about a riders union, everything gets shut down. I don't talk about it anymore because it's literally, it falls on deaf ears because, um, just what we were talking about with the sport is it's a waste of time. It's a waste of breath because it is not going to happen with my generation. It's going to happen with basically my daughter's generation of like, hey, this isn't acceptable anymore. And truthfully, if we're talking a little bit about politics, like you've heard me say the quote before, when good times create, what is it? Bad times create strong men, and then strong men create good times, and then good times create weak men, and then weak men create bad times, kind of a thing.
Yep.
Without saying where we are economically, the sport is growing because of the pandemic and whatnot. Everyone felt rich because there was an influx of money. Interest rates were low. You could borrow more, but inflation went through the roof, and so now we're entering. Well, we're exiting a bear market here. But I'm digressing. My point is society is getting soft, right? And the primarily viewership of my channel is people that are older than me, guys that were built up and, hey, just rub some dirt in it and it's going to be fine, and unfortunately, like I said, my daughter's generation is just, it's getting soft. It started with the millennials where it's poor me, things are going bad, whatnot, blah, 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 blah. And I'm kind of ironically debating myself here because with society getting soft is also going to give birth to not be people being unwilling to have what's currently going on, with maybe there will be a writers union because people are always going to want more. and they're not going to be as willing to be like, well, that's just how it is. So they're going to get together and talk about how it needs to change. I don't know. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Because I'm confusing myself talking about this.
No, you're right on the money. If we go back just a little bit, the original statement that you made was the idea of trying to help other riders as a sponsor is something that we all enjoy to do, but there's this ideology that if I become a good throttle jockey, that I'm entitled to more, even though I can do less and less for you as a partner. And it's what you're saying right there, Johnny. When you're, and by
CP
the
in the
way,
chat said it good too. It's just everyone has to be a winner now.
yeah, true, right? Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody's a winner. It should never be hard work. It should always be easy. It should be very quick. That's just what our young generation, that's their ideology. But if you go back, you're about to tap into, what are you at? 53,000 people. You've grown that by yourself. I don't care. You're very humble. You'll try to dismiss it. You've been met with nothing but resistance from the very beginning. You're full of negativity. You feel like the sport owes you something. You're playing the victim. Now, you've morphed. You've grown. You read more books than anybody I know. You as a person have changed, and the nature and the narrative of your channel has changed, but that's on you. You've changed by choice. You've changed because you're changing as an individual.
Coach, I don't
Now,
mean to interrupt you here, but just the guys in the chat here, it's the rule rather than the exception. I know a lot of my viewers here that are my age,
mhm.
it's the exception. It's not the rule. If you go talk to a college or something, you're going to hear a lot of this, lack of a better term, just weak-minded ideology of I should get a $150,000 job right after. I don't need to work hard. The whole deal of I want to retire at 29 and never work again. Well, you're going to die at 30 because you're going to be bored off your ass if you can even make it happen. Like, the beauty of being happy is having stuff to do. But anyway, go coach.
Well, I just wanted to elaborate on your question, confusing yourself. The problem that you run into is, if we're going to go off of what's being said in the chat room, the ideology that's being preached at colleges is an ideology that is based on no foundation of how basic economics works. See, that's the problem. I had a conversation. Michaela and I were at dinner with our daughter and one of her girlfriends, and it was a very amicable conversation. And she was angry that McDonald's isn't willing to pay $25 to serve a burger. And in a very polite way, I said, "How? What makes you say that comment?" She goes, "Well, cost of living is expensive, and people can't pay their bills on $12 an hour." Now, again, don't jump on, for those of you who understand basic economics. I know that seems like common sense to you, but this is the ideology. Nobody is teaching at the high school going into the college level the idea that for me to pay you $25 an hour means that I'm actually paying $50 an hour if I match all the taxes. Nobody talks about what the cost of the employer is, right? And we're not going to go into an economics conversation here tonight or today, but I want to go back to what you're saying. You've got a group of people in the industry that now want to jump on the momentum and the success of 53,000 subscribers that you've organically grown from nothing. When you originally started, you were told that you'd never be successful because you're pessimistic, negative. You've changed everybody's opinion. And I'm not here to argue, the way that you've morphed your channel, was that a good or a wrong? That's nobody's, that
Coach,
is,
there's a saying that a reputation takes time to build. It could take 20 years, but it can be over in a heartbeat, right?
yeah.
And so that's the whole first impression stuff. And
But what I disagree with is, and I think you didn't clarify so that the listeners understand what you're saying. You've built a channel to 53,000 subscribers, and now companies want to be a part of it so that you can promote their products and services. But oh, by the way, we're not willing to pay you. We just want to give you the privilege to say that we're a big company and we're going to allow you to be part of our narrative as if we're supposed to be grateful for it, not realizing that you can't pay your bills on thanks. See, that's what we're trying to get across. And you're being very kind. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus as to what you're alluding to. But when somebody now has a new product and they're like, "Hey, Johnny, I used to think you're an ass, but now you're a pretty cool dude. You've got 53,000 subscribers. Allow you to be a part of this new product or service we have. And then I'm gonna spin it as if I'm doing you a favor. That's what you didn't say. That's why you confused yourself. Why are you dumbfounded? Because you've
Yeah.
built everything on your own, and now people want a part of your pie, but they don't want to compensate you for it. That's not how the real world works, man.
Well, I no, like I said, dude, my crypto channel. That's why I feel, this podcast is just live. I know we talk about racing, but we're talking about the underlying brick and mortar foundation of the sport right here. The stuff that I'm frustrated, the stuff that I want to get out there, and to let everyone know that, hey, you build yourself up, you start filming yourself on a camera, whatnot. You get your way out there. But as far as negotiations go, there's a saying that never do anything once that you're not willing to do the rest of your life,
Hmm.
right? And you don't have to feel like, oh, I'm so grateful that I'm just part of the show. No, you're worth more than that. The privateers are worth more than that. Like, the just it's so hard to it's so easy from 1,000-foot view to be like, without the privateers spending all of their paychecks, all of their parents' paychecks, these second mortgages, whatnot, to go buy bikes, right? Like the guys that are on the factory teams that are potentially still paying for products and services, they make up very little of the demographic of the pie. 80 to 90%, I'm fairly certain, is coming from the enthusiast, and the enthusiast that has a big dream to go racing, right? But
Yep.
yet, once you get to the professional level, it feels like, oh, I'm so happy. I'm just going to continue to feel like get it for free. And unfortunately, I I have a view. Yes, I see things changing, but I'm so passionate about protecting the sport and the people that are getting involved in it, to where if you are raised your entire childhood and your parents are having a hard time getting to the races and whatnot, and you finally get to the race, and you're a professional now, um, you've got this like sense of, man, I can't let this go. I can't let this go. This is me. So if somebody is saying you have to pay to race, or you're not going to make a living doing this, you're
Hmm.
still going to keep doing it because you weren't taught differently. And so the whole point of my channel and everything is teaching when it comes to analysis, to becoming a better rider. But there's so much more to teaching. There's a business aspect to the sport where you should not do something for free ever. That's like it's simple advice, but it is so true. You never do something for free. Just,
May I
I'm
elaborate
having
on
a
that?
hard time. Yes,
No, no,
please
no, no,
interrupt me
no.
because
May I elaborate on what you just said?
sure, maybe you could dissect the Johnnyism.
Well, think about this. We're sitting here on YouTube. We've got how many people are in the chat room right now?
We've got 180. There's 10 people on
Okay.
Instagram,
Okay.
20 on.
So there better be 100 likes on this video right now. Smash that like button, please.
God,
All
yeah.
right. While we're talking about it. No, all seriousness, we're doing a podcast, we're doing a show that's streaming on YouTube. And this will fit, and I think it's probably the best way to put all of your thoughts into a concise statement. We're watching on YouTube for free a show that the producer of the show is going to get compensated for based on the effort that you're putting in. And yet we have people that will go race motocross, fill up the stadium, and not get paid. It's the only environment I've ever been around. Motocross and supercross is the only environment I have ever been around that doesn't compensate the people who bring the money to the show.
Coach, this perfect segue. You got my brain thinking here.
Okay.
So, YouTube, it was
Yes.
originally designed to be a dating platform,
Mhm.
and now it is the king all be all of self-promotion, self-content creation.
Mhm.
Why is that? Well, because Google was like, "Hey, YouTube is not being sold. People aren't buying subscriptions to go date. It's kind of been
Right.
done before. Something needs to change." What did they do that made the biggest difference and blew them up? They decided to start giving most of the ad revenue to the viewer, to the creator,
The
which is
producer. That's right.
essentially like the writer. And
Mhm.
it just blew up as far as more people joining, more content out there. They're giving 60% of all the ad revenue on YouTube to the creators.
That's
Sure,
my point. That's
they're
my
keeping
point.
40%, as they should. They're the business, they're the
Absolutely.
infrastructure, but they are giving the majority of it to essentially what they should be doing as far as the writers go. And maybe
Hey.
coach, I see where the sport is headed.
Mhm.
And my views are so different than the majority of people that I talk to, and that's why therefore, I seek a lot of different people's points because I don't understand.
Mhm.
I want them to share because I believe that you can learn how to panhandle from the homeless guy on the side of the street. He's going to be
Yeah.
better at asking for money than me. Just like, uh, if I wanted to learn more about nutrition, I come to you because I'm just going to start shoving cereal down my throat and be like, sweet, I got calories. But that's that's not how it works. But I'm digressing yet again. Shit. What
Think
was my
think about this, Johnny. Think about this, Johnny. Google paid 1.65 billion with a B. Google paid 1.65 billion for YouTube. So they invested in a platform. They bought it from the original creators of it. Going back to what you just said, now they've created or they didn't. They bought a platform and they've elevated it, as you say. Rising tides raises all boats. Now what they've done is they've built a platform where literally a 12-year-old kid showing how you open a box and use a toy is making money on a platform. Going back to what you said, giving 60% of the revenue back to the producer of content. And what a simple concept that continues to grow and grow and grow and grow. The ad revenue from YouTube is up exponentially. So if we just take and just draw the parallels, right? You have a group of investors that bought a platform that says, hey, wait a second, the platform's based on the people who add content. So we'll compensate those individuals with 60% and we'll reinvest in the platform and make it better. And it's got, like if you look at AI right now, YouTube is already in an environment that if somebody goes out and tries to essentially personify Johnny Hopper and they do it in an AI and they hire an AI bot to talk, YouTube will actually pull that down as plagiarism. They've already got that stopgap in place. You didn't have to pay for it. I didn't have
Google
to
is
pay
a
for it.
100% an AI company. Apple is an AI company.
Exactly.
Meta is an AI company,
But
and
it's but all of those platforms are based on what? The end user consuming data. So now we go into an environment of going racing. Why are the seats filling up? Why are people going and buying pit passes? And we're not even compensating the people that people are there to see.
coach, 100% agree. Again, the chat has got me giggling with this.
Uh-oh.
One of the comments, I guess, normally I won't read the comments unless they're super chats or anything.
Okay.
Self
Okay.
monetization here. But we've got an individual saying that it's the same negative conversation every week. No, this is not negative. This is there is you could tell it in my voice. I am frustrated at being involved in the sport by, just per se, maybe it's shit going on in my life, but you work hard, right? And anyway, it it's not about me. My whole point for this show is that to tell people that, hey, it is up to the masses to ask for change, right? The first person through the door gets crushed. And this isn't supposed to be negative. The sport is doing great things. I see a lot of change. And what I was alluding to as far as my views on where this sport is headed is it's for the greater good. Riders are now making more money. We've got the Super Motocross Championship. We've got another race back into Vegas. We're starting to get more sponsors with the likes of the Deegans out there that are bringing in more viewership for stuff. Same thing with here on YouTube with other content creators, with the sport not coming down on people as far as content striking, where a steal like an artist. If you are going to basically copy something, make it your own. And it gets back to the original viewer. And I get frustrated sometimes at Moto Media for trying to hold on to something that truthfully should be free, should be to the masses. Like maybe this is the whole Napster, uTorrent ideology of just give it away. Just give it away and let it prosper. And there are so much different avenues for stuff. But getting back to what I was saying is the privateer is eventually going to die. And it is because of the Supercross futures. It is an invite only. And in order to get your Supercross license, the majority of your points are coming from those races. To be invited to that stuff, you have to already be on a factory team, like a pro level team of some sort, where you used to be able to just buy a bike, sign up and go racing. So I see the need. There is so much of a need for like a stock class or something that happens on press day on the Friday or the day after. That is a privateer only stock class that almost becomes a draft to the bigger classes, as far as the 250 and the 450, because the 250 class was designed to be the stepping stone class. But coach, in reality, the 250 class is the most expensive class to try to race.
100%.
And so
Yep.
you've got riders that are arguably could do better in the 250 class as far as talent wise, but they decide to race the better riders, the more experienced riders, because the cost is lower. So therefore there's a need for another class that keeps costs lower for more people to get involved. And I see that happening with electric bikes as well. That's just where society is going. Electricity, with the solar panels, we're lacking just a battery for stuff, because it doesn't make economic sense to have a $5,000 generator to charge your $15,000 dirt bike that only lasts 45 minutes. Like it's a simple problem that there is going to be a fix for it. And the industry is slow on changing stuff because the industry is resistant to change. The corporations that be, coach, I know I'm very long-winded here.
No,
The
it's your show.
corporations,
It's your
Honda,
show.
Yamaha, it's you're my co-host here, so
Go for it.
have
Go for it.
full respect to interrupt me. I'm just passionate about it. My
That's
point
right.
is the corporations are not going to sell electric shit or spend the money to develop electric shit when that's not what they're selling. They're still selling two strokes. They're still selling this stuff. So they're not going to change it until there's a need for it to change. That's why Stark potentially might not survive, because they are filling a need that is very, very tiny, but they're jumping on the hope that they can stay alive long enough to where the other manufacturers jump in. And then now you've got kind of a builder base of a fan base for their product.
Yeah, 100%. I've got a very, very smart client, Scott Smyers, and these are the types of subjects that he's brilliant about. And he has been saying it for literally 3 years that I've had the privilege of working with him. And that is the subject of what you just said, Johnny. The production of the electricity isn't the issue. It's the capturing the retention and the utilization of it is where the biggest opportunity is. And I got ostracized in the chat room when we had the conversation about the e-bikes and then, automobiles, and people are like, well, Rob doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground when it comes to electric. You're right. I have absolutely I could give two shits about electric cars, electric anything. You and I've teased about it off the record. I've got ostracized here in the chat room. It's just not my wheelhouse. I read just enough to know that when I was listening to this one gentleman talk about how he was encouraged by his local community to take his entire warehouse, make all of his forklifts electric. And he did it. He spent a ton of money making the conversion, only to be told by the local municipalities that the amount of electric that his warehouse forklifts were pulling was more than the demands of the entire community. And they asked him to please cease and desist because they couldn't keep up with the energy necessary to recharge his forklifts that he invested into his warehouse. And you hear these conversations over and over again. You have in California, they're saying we're not going to have combustible engines, but yet we're being told that the power plants can't keep up with the demands of the electric cars that are already out there now. This is not to get into a political pissing match about pro or against battery type items. I'm just going off of what Scott Smyer said, and that is until we come up with a more effective way to harness the electric that we're able to create. It's ironic. Michaela and I, while we're here at the beach, we were at dinner, and I overheard this gentleman from Germany. And I always like to find, why are people here? The gentleman literally is the CEO of one of the largest energy companies in Germany. And of course, Johnny, you and I have talked about this before. I was fascinated. I said, how much of your power comes from solar? How much of it comes from electric? He says, we're at 50% solar and power. I said, how long has it taken you to get to that? Think about it. 50% of that region's needs for power is coming from solar and battery, or excuse me, from solar and from wind, 33 years it's taken them to get there. Now, what I thought was interesting, I said, well, why do you think it's taken so long? He says, it's the resistance of the people. Well, that's me, right? Like I don't resist it like I'm against it. I just haven't seen where the cost benefit outweighs itself. I was talking with Scott Smyers. He says, do you realize that the weight of an electric car is destroying the roads that we're driving? Nobody's taking that into consideration, the additional weight. Nobody's taking into consideration the plants that are manufacturing what they're producing is pulling more watts of power than the actual manufacturing plant itself. When you start adding the positives and the negatives, like if you're using an integer line, it's taking X amount of energy to create something that once it's created, what it's consuming is more than the plant that's making it. How do you justify that? That's what I'm confused about. And so if we come back full circle, and I guess this conversation feeds right into this gentleman that's in our chat room saying that we're nothing but negative. I always find it interesting that if we don't say something about, like, if somebody doesn't question electric power, you get, like, for example, if you don't question the cost of living, if you understand economics, you know it is inflation. When you understand that you can't have something, you can't ask somebody to get paid more money than the profit that the product produces. But yet you've got people that will jump on a bandwagon and say minimum wage should go up. But then they say that they don't want to pay for the increased price to offset the cost. There's a gentleman that, Johnny, this is in your wheelhouse. If you go to Slow Twitch, Dan Empfield, who owns Slow Twitch, he's the original creator of Kutanaru bicycles. Him and his wife are very extremely philanthropic. They have a marathon. He just canceled his marathon because he said he can't even afford to buy t-shirts for it because people want to pay less for the races and get more perks. Well, you can't have more cost at a decreased price and have sustainability. So for this negative guy in the chat room, my question is, what would you
Coach,
do?
we don't even need to.
No. My question is, we're not here to be argumentative. If you and I are being negative, and then we
I
try
don't
to,
think so.
I don't think so either. I think we're discussing reality, which seems like some people in this world have a hard time dealing with reality. If you're dealing with reality, let's talk about a conversation, or let's have a conversation on solutions. That's all you and I ever do on this show. Let's talk about, would it do us any good to come out and just say, oh, let's talk about solutions. What are you solving, Johnny? Solutions to what? You have to discuss the problem to come up with the solution. The solutions are designed to raise all tides. So now we come back to this whole subject that we're on today. If you've got a group of individuals that are willing to race for free, then what makes you think that the promoters are all of a sudden going to say, well, let's change the model? And yet it goes back to your original comment. You're trying to help out privateers, and privateers aren't interested in trying to help you grow your products and services. And so if you take our entire conversation and you lay it on paper, numbers going out versus numbers being invested, you're always going to be on a net negative. And that's the problem. That's why we have inflation. That's why we have interest rates the way we do today. Because if you don't understand the common sense, you can't keep taking and taking and taking without somebody having to pay the price.
This sport is a smaller version of the government, of economics, 101. That's what it's based off of.
Yeah.
And what we are saying is that there is a ripple happening, and it is gravitating out to where we are going to see some massive changes in the industry, what we've already seen, right? And it starts with that's why I invite so many different content creators on this show because it's all in preservation of this beloved sport. We don't want to see it go down, and if anything, it is going up. It is on the rise, right? You've Bike sales are off the hook. The questions that we're asking is what is staying the same and what needs to change, right? We're seeing I'm so impressed by what the sport has done currently with limiting the 9 whoops and having no more dragon backs. I mean, maybe the whoops uh, I'm resistant to change on that for sure because I want to see guys struggle. I want to see some more racing action there, but there is less injuries that have happened. And so for the sake of the riders and safety, they're doing a good job. And we point out a lot of things that happen and yeah, it is very easy to focus in on um, the biggest problem in the sport, which is the money, right? But my thing is that there is so much opportunity out there, and in the midst of chaos, there is opportunity. And as far as when it comes to the main decision makers, where they're selling, hey, look at how much we're promoting in the package and how much they're charging potentially to some of the sponsors. YouTube and content creation, that sort of thing, is where a good portion of viewership happens. Like I know my numbers are pretty close to what Supercross gets, but I don't know. It's interesting that people don't want to hear change. They don't want to ask the question, where is it headed? And so you get disappointed when things do go electric because the sheer fact of the matter, the biggest energy source that we know of is up in the sky. You can't look at it directly, but if there's any way to harness any of that, that's where the majority of our energy is going to come from. And yeah, we can talk about how like transitioning from that stuff is going to ruin jobs and whatnot, but society is moving more towards a technological advance to where we don't really do much. We're going to have
Mhm.
computers do stuff for us. We're going to have AIs do stuff for us, and it's going to be a sustained business model. Because how many people do you know as of right now are just kind of wasted space, right? They don't really add anything to society. They're just there, right? And unfortunately, I'm kind of making the connection with some of the stuff that happens here in the sport, unfortunately, and the whole point is I want to see grinders. I want to see people that are working their ass off and getting paid to do it, right? Ultimate goal is we want guys to be able to retire off of this stuff, and it starts with a conversation. um and sometimes it's not the most fun conversation to have, right? To say that, sure, we're working on a problem, but God, the chat is just coach. I don't know. I don't know.
Here's
Honesty kills, and I'm interrupting you, coach. And
no, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
dude, I've had a really rough couple months, and it's just all coming up to a head, and I'm just ready to
Mhm.
fucking pop the pimple and just move on with my fucking life with stuff. And yes, I am incredibly frustrated at how much effing work I put into this stuff and how I don't know. Let's
No, let's
maybe
let's 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 stay on this because it's good. It's raw, it's rough right now. Anybody who looks at our conversation as being negative is the source of the problem. Plain and simple. It doesn't matter if you're talking about politics, religion, gender. I don't give a flying flip about if you want to make life better for everybody, not just your selfish self, then you've got to be willing to listen to conversations that you don't think are important. And that's the problem with this world right now is I want to sit back and Johnny, I'm going to kind of I hope I don't botch it up. We're living in a
no, you
time
can't
where
do it
people have
worse than either.
we're living in a world where look at the veterans who paid the price for our freedom and now you have punks that think you can burn the flag and that's their freedom to do so. squashing on the fact that men and women have lost their life for it. So when you have somebody in the chat room that's like, oh, I'm here for moto, and you're not talking about moto, you're the source of the fucking problem. You are the source of the fucking problem. Because if we don't just sit here and say, life is great, we have a full gate, we have plenty of people racing, leave it alone, it's all good, you're all negative, you're the fucking problem. Leave. If you want to come in and like I could give two shits about electric cars, but I will listen to Johnny talk about it because as a conservative, I'm a conservative from I consider myself conservative from a financial standpoint. Don't fucking take money out of my pocket to push your self-serving agenda when everybody else has to pay the price for your selfishness. Now, I don't consider myself a Superman or superhero, but I'm going to do what's right for Johnny and myself. I'm going to do what's right for everybody in the chat room, Johnny and myself. And then when somebody wants to selfishly take something from us because it makes their life easier and they don't think they have to work for it, you're the problem. Leave. Go do it somewhere else. Go commiserate with your little peeps who all think that everything is great and glorious and easy. Go figure it out on your own. Now I'm not mad. I'm not angry. What I'm saying, Johnny, is you're at a popping point right now because you have created tremendous amount of success for yourself against the odds, personally and professionally.
Coach, people are asking me what I'm pissed about. I'm pissed about I need help.
Johnny, we could sit here for
And
3 hours and talk about why you're pissed. People have no idea what you go through. And you're not asking for a yada boy, a pat on the back, and be on the broadcast news at 6 p.m. tonight.
No,
This isn't the environment, and you've never brought what you endure on a weekly basis. What we are talking about, and this is for the little two punks that are in the chat room. That
chat it up, guys. Chat it up. Your views matter, and this is MX Unfiltered, and it's just from a broad state.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem. You have grown your channel to be very, very successful with a tremendous amount of momentum. Now the industry, so if the two assholes in the chat room would just stop tapping and listening for 90 seconds, quit telling us that we're all negative Nellies and fucking listen, you have built a tremendous channel that has
the heat coming off you. I feel like I'm getting a sunburn.
But the problem is you've got two assholes that are taking a cheap shot at my best friend. And I will fucking go down with the fire in a fight.
It's not that bad, Coach.
No. It is bad because
no. Communication is 7% words and like 38% body language, and the majority of it is tone. You get no context.
The problem is, Johnny, is anybody can be a little keyboard hero and throw little snide comments out. That's all. That's why I have a problem with the situation. You, Johnny Hopper, have provided an environment for some keyboard warrior to come out and make snide little comments to try to make themselves look like they're superior because you're talking about something that they don't want to hear about. Then fucking leave. Leave. There's an exit button.
If this is good content, make sure you hit that like button and help Coach get over to 23,000 subscribers right now, guys, with the 300 people in the chat.
This is the reason why you're about to pop. You've grown all this momentum against the odds. People said you wouldn't be successful. And now the same industry that we've talked about needs to change for the benefit and the growth of the privateers are the same people coming in saying, hey, Johnny, promote my products and services, but I don't think that I should have to compensate you. Now, if you can't wrap your head around that, Johnny, if you add any more to it, our little snowflakes over here, they're not going to know what to do. You got to get it down to elementary level so that people can understand it. See, if I disagree with you, I've immediately just put my head on hold because you don't agree with me. So I'm going to fight you and resist you instead of you're very big on conversation and dialogue. But yet we've got some peeps in the chat room that say the show is always so negative. Well, guess what, Johnny? I remember when you told me a few very significant people in our sport said, Johnny, your channel will never succeed. You're too negative. And now you've got 53,000 subscribers. And now the same people are coming back saying, would you promote my products and services? But I don't think I should have to pay you, Johnny, which is what you started the whole conversation about today. You have privateers that say, I'm a great throttle jockey. You should give me everything for free and I shouldn't have to give you anything in return. Johnny, you've worked your ass off. You work 20 hours a day. Your daddy daycare. You don't ask for anybody's pat on the back. You still keep producing shows every week. People have no idea what goes into it. You make content, you edit it, and it's never enough. If you just did a little more, Johnny,
Well,
that's why you're about to blow.
dude, who knows where the future holds for me and in the sport. I love the sport, and the best experience is not your own. You know, I want to teach people and be sincere about don't make the same mistakes as me. Plain and simple. And the whole negativity that started off at the beginning of the freaking channel is I was mad at my experiences. I was never attacking the sport or blaming the sport for anything. I was mad at my experiences, and people took it out of out of context. And this is a podcast. This is MX Unfiltered. This is for unfiltered thoughts that we don't get to hear. This is different than what the majority of the content out there is. You know, I want to position ourselves as being different, as a platform for um, a lot of people. And yes, there is accountability that needs to be had in the sport with stuff. And society as a whole is going by the best narrative, right? And I love the sport. I love what it's doing. I love how it's changing. I love where we're headed. I love teaching people in all of this. But yes, hey, so if we talk about some things that need to be changed, it's a banter, it's a debate. The guys in the chat room, I sincerely applaud you guys, and make sure that you let your opinion be heard, because without you, there is no sport. There is nothing without the viewership, right? You guys are gold. Every single one of you are gold and should be treated as much. And I just want to make it shown that you are. Make sure that you know it. You know, don't stand for anything less. And it's not just these problems. There is solutions for them, but they trickle down through all two wheels, from bicycling to AMA Superbike to Moto America, which is kind of the same thing, to enduro, to everything. And gosh, you know, my views have changed so much as being an adult. I feel somewhat like a Democrat at the family level. I feel like a Republican at the state level, and then at the national level, I feel like a libertarian. And that's just because I'm picking and choosing my values on stuff. And so I don't think that people need to be put into a box as far as what's right and wrong. There's a gray area with all that stuff, and that's what we're talking about, is the gray area to change. And I know I had so much different planned for this stuff, and part of my frustrations is that, like, not speaking ill of anyone, is it's hard to get people to, dude, it's society right now. It's the community service. Whether you're at Taco Bell or whatever, like, you expect people to do their job. You expect people to do what they say they're going to do. And it just doesn't happen. And the same thing is going on in the sport, and especially with some of the riders, is like, words matter. Effing just do what you say you're going to do. Plain and simple. But it doesn't happen, right?
Yeah. Well, and be consistent in your message. What I have a problem with is the flipping, flopping. It's like when I look at this whole transgender situation, I made a comment online that, like, I have a daughter, and if my daughter was on a swim team, it'd be a cold day in hell before some male is going to walk into a locker room with my daughter. I don't need the school. I don't need a swim coach. I don't need anybody telling me where my boundaries lie with the safety and the protection of my daughter. Now, if you want to look at that as a political jab, if you consider me against a transgender, that's a completely different subject. My responsibility is my daughter. And I don't understand why we put our hands of the safety of my daughter in the hands of somebody else. That's nobody else's responsibility. Now, I can't be with her 24/7, but when and where I can, I will. And it's the same subject when it comes to moto. What I think is interesting is, if you watch back in the day when you had News Center with ESPN, right? They didn't go on there and just dote all over the football game or the baseball game or the ice hockey. What they talk about? They talked about the racing. They talked about things that were bad. If there was a bad ref call and it had a huge impact on the results of the game, they talked about it. If we talk about it, people say we're being negative. That's interesting. Which again just goes to show, and I will go to my deathbed on this opinion. It just goes to show that the narrative and the message for so long before social media came out has been so manipulated that now that we have other outlets to be able to communicate.
Coach, I don't know if it's been manipulation, but I think it's been lack of transparency. Okay,
That's fair.
there's
That's fair.
there's no need to say what people don't ask, right? And that's in business is you don't need to point out the fine little details if nobody brings the attention to it, right?
Right. Right. But where I politely disagree with you on that is if somebody's not made aware of it. I mean, this used to be what newspapers were all about, was to essentially their job was not to create a narrative, it was to tell the story. And so if something's being done that's illegal or mischievous or deceitful, that was the job and the role. When you have the entire industry that was essentially two or three publications and all of those people communicated with each other, they could control the narrative. And then when things came out, like the way that the contract, like the truth behind Hangtown not having a national, if you look at the idea that how much money do the pros actually make, if it doesn't get discussed, well, then nothing changes. So is that being deceitful? Because if nobody knows, we don't have to change anything. But as soon as people know, now we do need to make changes. I call that, unfortunately, being very, very manipulative, in my opinion.
Uh um on a lighter note here.
Okay.
Okay, cuz I'm
Follow
I'm
your
tired
gut.
of bitching. I'm tired of bitching, okay? So let's stop bitching and let's um move on to gosh.
We got a race this weekend.
We do have a race this weekend and yeah, I guess there's no segue to anything that went on. We in overview, we talked about some of the changes that are happening to the sport and for the
Yep.
good, right? And that it's what's done is done. It's up to the riders now to not to back it up. To back it up
Hmm.
is essentially oh, here. I'm just gonna share this if I can. Oh crap. But I'm guessing there's not gonna be any audio. Do you hear audio, coach?
No, sir.
Yeah, 'cause great. Let me try that one more time. I liked AP has been really good. He's had a couple different podcasts where he's talking about money and he's talking about some other things. Do share to share. Yeah,
Where was
sorry.
that? Where was that posted on, Johnny?
This is YouTube. This is actually for Monster Energy
From Monster
Supercross.
Energy. Okay.
And there was another video that was out that I think Vital did where Darkside was talking about what do you want to hear from journalists. And the funny thing was that most of the writers actually said that to um they wanted not cookie cutter questions of like what they changed on the bike and everything.
Yeah.
And I find that
Well, that's a perfect example of when the narrative is being manipulated. You've got the actual athletes themselves saying what they would like, and then compare that to what they actually receive. And so, if anybody doesn't think that there is a control, and I'm going to use my word again, manipulation of we're going to stay right in this little box right here. Who's the one that's controlling that? Somebody who wants to control the message and the narrative. That's manipulation.
But coach, like I love what's going on here, where you literally have Monster Energy Supercross talking about some of the riders, what kind of rules they want to have changed. Yes, they can have whatever narrative they want. You know, if something was way left field, they could not put it in the video. But for that being
Well,
said, there's
but
still
you just summed up exactly what I'm saying. We're
Mhm.
gonna ask a question. If we don't get the answer we want, we'll just edit it out of the video. That's not
I know,
authentic.
but I am gonna give them credit that they're doing a good job for some of this stuff, but here, this
Sure,
is
sure.
class. That's especially fair now because they're freaking 95 horse. 252 strokes in the 250 class. That's especially fair now because they're freaking 95 horsepower on a freaking 250. So it'd be a good matchup, I think.
I really like that as far as make the rule change to let the 252 strokes in, and the
Yeah.
next step with that is then letting electric bikes in. I mean, they've got um, the Starks have got now deals to where that you can lock down the ECU to make sure that it is stuck to a 45 horsepower limiter, where the promotions can do that. Um, and
How cool would that be though? Because now you're almost coming back to like that Kawasaki Race of Champions where everybody's on exactly the same bike. You can fiddle with the suspension a little bit, but you're literally the confines of the bike and the configuration is as identical as you can possibly do. I love that. I think that kind of stuff would be very
that's where
cool.
the next stock class is going to happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And coach, what do you think of are we going to have another mutter? I really hope that we're not going to have
Oh,
another mutter.
that's my only concern.
It's
Because
not supposed to rain.
if it's a mudder, I mean, we're right back to crapshoot. Anything can happen. I mean, you look at those first 3 rounds when we had mud or, the 3 consecutive rounds that we had mud, and you have somebody winning the week before and now getting lapped twice in the next weekend. I mean, it's typical mud. I don't think anybody gets super excited about it. Yeah, it's racing and we all love to watch racing, but it's not that bar to bar action that we like. So I hope we don't have a mudder, but if it is, hey, somebody's got to be the one that steps up and make it work.
Dude,
And
honestly, listening to the chat, everyone's talking about why they don't want to see riders race electric. I mean, why wouldn't we want to watch riders race the newest and coolest technology on stuff? I mean, their damn near suspension is basically electric right now. All the data acquisition is electric. So the motor is just the last piece of the puzzle when everything else is electric. I mean, freaking KTM, their whole ECUs on changing everything from suspension. I made it over on my um This Week in Moto show
yeah.
when we were talking about the new KTM and how much that bike, the electronics in it is just incredible with their new, gosh, what is it? Dun, dun, dun. These are all the two strokes here. But the
But
new connectivity deal, like it is all electric that is just coming more to the consumer with changing the suspension, knowing the quick shift, the traction control, like this stuff is all electronics. That's the thing that I'm talking about as far as just resistance to change. Like we see it happening and how people how the narrative just the narrative is controlled by so much of your ideology. Like, let's just have an open mind. Basically, this whole show is just having an open mind to be willing to accept change for what it is.
Well, yes and no. If you look at the idea that we were forced into the four-stroke and nobody really wanted it until we were forced to embrace it, is that really giving the consumer what they want? I mean, thank goodness KTM is at least kept up the availability of a lot of two-stroke models.
Well, coach,
But
why is that? Because I was right around the era where I was moving from an 85 two-stroke, and it was like, do I go with a 125 or do I go with a 250 four-stroke?
yeah,
And it was ultimately go with the 254 stroke because it was faster and better. And I don't see any difference between going from a four-stroke to now an electric bike when it's that much better,
well,
right?
I have to disagree with you. I have no problem with them wanting to introduce new technology. You want to bring in a four-stroke, that's great. Make it a four-stroke only class, but still allow me the 252-stroke class and keep it a 252-stroke class. If you want to bring in a 254-stroke, have a 254-stroke class. If You want to bring in electric, bring in an electric, exactly what you're saying. But don't force me to have to spend $6,000 more on a 4-stroke when I don't want to spend that kind of money. I don't want to, one of the favorite things, my boys are older now. I remember when we bought them their first TTR, 50 and 90, and half the fun when we that's on the 4-stroke, we didn't have to tear it down, but we did buy an RM80 2-stroke. And the main reason why I bought it for those guys was so that we could take it apart in the garage and they could learn how to rebuild a 2-stroke. You can't do that. At least I'm not comfortable with rocker arms and valves and all that other stuff. It's not as easy. I have no resistance to new products, technology, no resistance whatsoever. What I do have a problem with is being forced to take something on. And you could apply that with electric cars. I've said this on the show before. I will never buy an electric car. I know you've got your truck and we've talked about it.
It's half electric, and it's pretty stupid that the male ego needs to have a artificial sound for the truck itself up until 15 miles an hour, and it's a little V6 Tundra as opposed to the big V8.
Yeah.
But truthfully, dude,
but you have options. And I think that's where, whether it's having a platform like X where you can go out and say whatever you want and not get censored, go to the dealership, not be forced to buy one or the other because you're going to the races and the races are saying, hey, you just don't have a class to race and now you're forced to buy a 4-stroke. That's where I have a problem with it. I do like your idea though, no disrespect to the little guys. I would much rather see Josh Hansen, the Hill brothers. I'm trying to think, give me 5 or 6 guys that shred on the e-bike that we've seen so far. I still give Josh and Justin Hill the most credit in my world of bringing credibility to the e-bike. When you watch those guys out in the dunes just go full send, you're like, damn, that bike actually can. Because I kind of laugh when I think about an e-bike originally. I just picture it being just a cheap piece of crap. You know what I mean? And the Hill brothers just went full send mode on it. Can you imagine having, as an exhibition race, you have the futures, you have the 250 class, 450, and then you have 6 badass dudes on an e-bike? Because for me, what I would love, I'm going to miss the smell. I'm going to miss the sound, but to watch Josh Hansen and the Hill brothers go full send mode and to watch it and witness it. Like I've only seen it on video. I've never seen it in person. I know you've ridden one at your brother's house, which was cool. But for myself, I'm not going to go buy an e-bike, but I'd be interested to watch it ride.
The next thing I see that's happening is probably these hydroelectric bikes. Is really where I see the technology going. Is the electric is not quite there because the batteries, it takes effing way too freaking long, 2 hours to charge the damn bike, which a hydroelectric motor, which you're basically riding a hydrogen bomb at that point. So I don't know how that would work out in, in actual consumer retention and reliability and whatnot. But at least you would be able to charge the bike inside of 5 minutes, in between your motos. You'd be able to do something. And there's so many people in the comments here that are talking about like, why am I trying to shove electric stuff down people's mouth? And my view with new information, I want to have the ability to change my outcome or change my view on anything. Right. And I've ridden the electric bikes. I've ridden the Alta and I was like, not so much, but I've ridden the Stark and it was a massive step in the right direction from the Alta. And I can just only imagine what the new Honda is going to be like that's electric. And for a privateer and a consumer, we talk about ball and stick sports. One of the hardest things to get involved into the sport is not only do you have to have the money to buy the shit, but then you also have to learn the skill. But then third, you need to become a mechanic because of all the internals with that stuff. But what does an electric bike do for you? It gets rid of one of those. Yeah, you still need chain and sprocket and things of that nature. But the overall is you don't have to worry about valves. You don't have to worry about pistons. You don't have to worry about this going out because you literally have an electric motor in there. And the difference from racing at a pro level, right? And having what just AP said not too long ago here, he alluded to, this is a perfect segue. And what did he say here? He said that you should have a 252 stroke.
2 strokes in the 250 class. That's especially fair now because they're freaking 95 horsepower on a freaking.
Yeah. Why is it that the 250 class have got sometimes faster lap times than the 450 class? Is because those little bikes are doing 60 horsepower and a stock 250F is 36, right?
Yeah.
And you've got a factory bike that is doing double with all of its electronics and everything. Boom, insert electric motorcycle that has 80 horsepower to it. Now you're leveling the playing field. I'm just about leveling the playing field, and technology is the way to do that. Just like I don't need to have another rebuttal to what I said.
I don't think anybody's arguing with the technological advances and stuff. Just keep everything partitioned off. Just again, it goes back to choice. I was teasing with Michaela about this over the week. I remember I grew up in Orlando. Many of you guys remember it's still there. It's now called Orlando MX. It used to be called Bithlo, right? And I remember we didn't get to the racetrack till 8:39 in the morning, and there were 4 motos. You know, there was the 80 class. We didn't have 85s, the 125 class, the 250 class, open. And if there were some pros there, you might have a 5th moto, which was a pro race, but it was 2 moto format. It was 20 minutes long, and everybody just run what you brung. And but the point is, it's like I just don't feel like I should have ever been, and I wasn't, and I didn't. I never, that's not true. I did buy a 250F when I bought my boys TTR 50 and 90. And then we bought the 2 strokes. But my point being is, if I was going to go racing competitively, or like at the level you were, Johnny, and I hate to use the word fair. God, I'm even trepidatious to say that word. But all right, if we're going to go pro racing, allow the guys that don't want to buy 4 strokes, let them continue to have their own standalone class with only 2 strokes, 250s, and then have your own 250 4-stroke class and then 450 4-stroke class. But don't strong arm us. I mean, isn't it amazing how we can take one bike and we can have 13 classes for a 250 4-stroke? You know, instead of just having a 85 class, a 125 class, and 250, now we have 11 classes on a 250. It's like, for Christ's sake, man, can we have one class, allow all of us who love 2 strokes? And yes, I'm resistant to a 4-stroke. Johnny, I don't want this to offend you. I'm not against the technology of a 4-stroke. I think advancements are great. I just don't like the idea that now my cost of going riding and racing has literally doubled or even tripled. And that's where I have a problem with it. But I think if
Okay,
we,
why? Sorry, just elaborate real quick as to why
yeah,
it's doubled and tripled.
well, when I can buy a 2-stroke and I could rebuild the top end, or if I take a rock to the header or the main part of my pipe coming out of the header, it cost me $189 to replace my pipe versus $900 for the header and another $500 for the exhaust piece. Every little
True, but it's
thing.
old technology. You can't be you.
I don't care
It's
about
rare to be
technology.
successful
I don't
on a
care.
2-stroke. If you want to be competitive, you need the
No,
4-stroke.
no, I don't. If I race nothing but 2-strokes, I'm competitive in my only 2-stroke class. And if I make the 4-stroke jump, then I'm in a class of nothing but 4-strokes. That's my choice to race. See what I'm saying? Unfortunately, they allowed the 4-strokes to kind of squat down on the 2-strokes, which then, of course, like you said, Johnny, you're going to go where the horsepower is at. Of course, you're going to drop the 2-stroke. Keep the 2-stroke class by itself. 4-stroke class 250, 4-stroke 450 class. Instead of having 13 classes on just a 250 at the amateur level, it's gotten so out of control. But I do like what you said though, Johnny, and I do agree with you. None of us, I don't know, maybe the chat room can tell me if I'm full of shit or not. I don't think anybody's against the advancement of technology as long as it becomes optional. It's when we can't go race without having to race against a 4-stroke, and we love the 2-strokers, and that's what we want to ride. Then let us still have. And I know that some of those classes are still there, but I don't think anybody would argue that they're very convoluted. You know, it's not. I think there is a 2-stroke AB class or BC class or something like that, but I think we've kind of got this whole conversation convoluted. Nobody's against technology, and I don't think anybody's against an electric bike. I think there's, myself included, diehards. I'm not enamored by an
No,
e-bike
no.
in regards to racing, but I'm not against them. Let me just say this, Johnny. I'm not against an e-bike, but I'll never purchase one. And that is what's great about America, right? We have choices.
And why is it that you will never purchase one?
just because of the cost on them. And to me, it's like an electric car. I think it's interesting when people say, well, look at how much mileage you get out of an electric car. But then I talk to people that when you put that battery into a landfill, if you see, this is where it gets a little bit touchy, because if you're telling me that you're advocating an electric car for the sake of the environment, then you just essentially created a hypocritical statement, because once that battery goes in the landfill, it does not decompose. So, because you got to remember, the genesis for a lot of these products was, oh, it's all about the environment. We got to get away from combustion. But then you look at what's charging these vehicles is essentially the thing that you said that you're trying to eliminate. So to me, you just contradicted yourself. Now, if we're talking technology and technological advances, I love a 4-stroke. The things are damn near bulletproof. They last for forever. See, that's what I'm saying. If I'm looking at the cost of going racing, I personally am going to keep myself and my boys on a 2-stroke because I enjoy working on the bikes. It's having different reasons for why you would choose to go 2-stroke, 4-stroke, or go electric or
And
non-electric.
see, I'm talking about like the growth of the sport. How do you get more
Absolutely.
people into it? And it's going to
Absolutely.
be through the electric. Regardless, yes, the batteries suck. Yes, that's a problem, but there's a solution to that problem. May it be hydroelectric stuff, where that's just even newer technology than, like, we're going to see here in the next 5 years. We're going to see most big automobile manufacturers coming out with hydroelectric stuff.
Well, think about this, and I think I may not be exact on my statistic, but I read a report that of all the electric cars that are being manufactured because of government regulations, they've only sold 16% of the total cars that they've been forced to make, which I think is cool, because I mean, not because I'm against the electric car. It just goes to show you that you can't force the consumer. The government can force the manufacturers because of the political landscape, but you can't force a consumer to buy something, even though the government thinks they can. They can't force us to do something we don't want to do. That's the power of the checkbook. But if you're talking about the growth of the sport, I could not agree with you more. And you've said it over and over again. Can you imagine if we had an e-bike park where you had dudes sending it on a dirt bike and it's 100 feet away from a housing development? That's going to sell bikes, right? I'm not going to buy one, but I do.
And coach, unfortunately, just what you're scared of is exactly what's going to happen. Is
Mhm,
the e-bikes are going to be thrown down your throat.
mhm.
We've got bicycle e-bikes that are at most of the shops now. Gas, KTM are all making them. They're pretty cool as a bicycle. I didn't mean to interrupt you
No, you're
here,
good.
but
You're good.
unfortunately, I'm an asshole and I'm good at it.
It's your show.
Well, no,
No,
it
it's your
wouldn't be the show
show.
without you. And I'm just bantering with
Yes.
you here because I think we're both on the same level
Mhm.
of stuff. You want to have choices, which is great. You know, I want
Well,
to have.
I think the conversation needs to be more, if we're going to talk about growing the sport, I think you cannot, this is a double negative. If you're talking about growing the sport, you cannot avoid or dismiss electric bikes. If you're looking at the cost of the average person that likes, I consider myself an average person that likes to ride and race, I'm looking at it from a cost standpoint. Well, then don't force a 4-stroke down my throat. If you're talking, all right, I'm going to be hyper competitive and I want to win at a pro level, and that pro class has 4-stroke, well, then I have to go. That's where I'm saying I don't want our conversations to get convoluted. If you're talking about growing the sport, electric is part of the environment. But then when I look at the e-bike and I look at the fact that the batteries take forever to charge, they don't last very long. I like one of the comments that was in the chat room here, which we haven't even talked about, but I agree, is what does it do to the environment in regards to cultivating the materials it takes to create these batteries? That's where the conversation gets convoluted. If you're talking about, hey, the e-bike platform is coming, that's technology. I get it. I embrace it. But I don't think that the end user should be forced to go that route. And unfortunately, the race promoters, a lot of their money comes from the OEMs. And if the OEMs are investing a lot of R&D dollars, it's just the trickle down effect. Totally. As long as we stay in each vertical about what we're talking about. If you're talking about the vertical of growing the sport, an e-bike is going to have to be embraced. If you're looking at the idea of making racing a little bit more economical, then there needs to be a competitive 2-stroke class where we can choose to go race. And how cool would it be, where you get to a level where you could have a group of athletes that are, let's say, the privateers. And Johnny, you've been advocating for this for a long time. let the factory teams be its own Formula One premier class, and then have the privateers be exclusively two smokers. And it's a little bit less expensive for the privateers to go race, but at least everybody's on a two smoker, and come up with some way to make sure they're not running a power stroke. But that's another story. But I think it's doable.
100%. 100%. And it's not there yet. That's what it shows you, is that the consensus is not ready for it. And that's the exact reason as to why we don't have Hondas at the local dealership now of them, and Yamahas and whatnot. And I'm holding out not for a Stark. I'm holding out for a Honda before I buy one.
When are they supposed to come out? When's a Honda slated to come out?
Gosh, I don't know. I'm just off the top of my head, I'm thinking 26, 27. So this conversation is way in advance of its time.
Not really, because you think about it, Trey Kennard raced one earlier in the year. So it's like, to your point.
That's in beta test.
Yeah, but still, to your point, you watch Trey Kennard go out there and do well on it. Of course, that's going to entice somebody like yourself who's a racer, because that has all the technology, which you're a techno geek in that regard. You love that technology, and it's on a Honda platform. And then you see somebody as good as Trey Kennard riding it.
Well, and he was very competitive.
Yeah,
at it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He was darn near racing, winning until the bike kind of took him out.
Yeah.
And died. That shows you that just the technology is not quite there. And I'm so biased. Again, this goes back to my upbringing, and a lot of the injuries. I've had 13 or so surgeries, and that I'm not going to bore people with. Coach, a little bit about all the metal in my body here, but a lot of that was due to bike malfunction. And so, as a consumer, where do I want to spend my money? I still love riding dirt bikes. I still love getting in the zone. But the one thing I'm scared about is now that, I don't have a team behind me. I don't have my dad that was my mechanic that spent 20, 30 hours a week on the motorcycle, so I'm scared of, left to my own devices, having something break on that motorcycle and hurting me, because it's hurt me so much. And what is the solution to that? For my unique problem, it's an electric bike.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's still things that are going to happen with that. Being honest, I could care less about the environment or whatnot if I can just go play on my dirt bike and not have to worry about it hurting me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the selfishness in me. And that's why I'm full blown. After riding the Stark, I was like, I love this bike. Besides the weird feeling in the air of the RC, I could get used to it. And the only reason why I don't want to go buy a Stark right now is because, what about the parts? I'm a big believer, as far as investments go, as you buy reputable companies that you use on a daily basis, that have staying power. Stark Industries, it sounds cool. Sounds like Iron Man. They got a really cool bike. They got all this nice infrastructure. But if I go buy a $15,000 bike, what happens if the battery blows and they go under? Well, now that battery is now 30 grand to go get another one.
Yeah.
I'd much rather put my money in a Honda, where I know they're going to be able to service the sucker if something happens.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up another subject when you talk about bicycles. I mean, if you look at the e-bike and how it literally has revolutionized the cycling industry, I mean, it's no secret. You go back 8-10 years ago, the bike industry was at a very, very stagnant stage. There was no new. You had triathlons that have kind of, if you start with your normal road bike, and then you have the proliferation of the tri bikes, then the tries kind of run its kind of gamble and its gambit, and it's come down. Then you had the gravel bike start to kick in there a little bit. Well, then the e-bike comes, and it's a game changer for everybody, because for a multitude of reasons. If you're a hardcore cyclist and your partner's maybe not as fast as you get a little bit of assistance, you guys can ride together. We can go in and, again, do pros and cons on it. But nobody would argue the idea that the e-bike has given bike shops a completely new breath of life. Do I own one? No. Would I buy one? No. But that's okay. I'm going to be a little bit of the economic side of things. It's very hard for me to justify an e-bicycle that costs as much as a 4-stroke motorcycle. I'm damn sure going to go buy a 4-stroke motorcycle before I'm buying an e-bike. Now, that's not a dish on the e-bikes. The e-bikes are really killer. I love looking at them. The designs are cool, and I've talked to people who ride them. That's awesome. I'm just never going to buy one because to me, I look at the price point. And Johnny, you and I teased about this off the record. When you got into triathlons, you weren't looking at a $3,000 bicycle. When you got serious about triathlons and you start looking at your Cervelo and the P3s and you start looking at all these different bikes, you're looking at $12,000 to $15,000 for the top end tri bike. But
which is crazy.
it is crazy. But what it does is it comes back to our whole conversation here with our dedicated subscribers and listeners. It comes back to what is your currency? If like right now we have 11 bikes at our house. I've got some Yeti SB66s. I've got a couple time trial bikes. We've got a multitude of different bikes. Well, if I wasn't racing triathlon, it'd cold day in hell before I'd spend $12,000 on a tri bike. So if you're not into riding moto, you look at like this, what's the price point on that new that new KTM that you did the highlight on your weekend moto? What's the price point on that bad boy?
Gosh, let me see if it.
I mean, I would assume it's got to be $12,000, $13,000.
Dun, dun, dun. Not the factory editions here. It's gonna be. See, this is the stuff that's just the transparency. That's a
Yeah.
bummer. It just fine dealer,
Right. Yeah.
You
So
know?
let's just say it is $15,000 or $16,000. Well, if you go to a high-end bike shop, you could spend that on a Felt, or you could spend that on a Specialized or a Canyon or one of these high-end bikes. So if your currency, which it is now, Johnny, is to go do triathlons, you're looking at the technology going, yep, I want to get into triathlons, so I'm willing to invest that money. If somebody's got a couple of young children, it might be the Stasic bike that then becomes the e-bike. My question is, and I'd love for anybody who's in the chat room who has young children, are
Dude,
you
I
going
probably
to?
lost so many subscribers being for e-bikes here. I'm just being honest, and no, I hear you, Coach.
We're just having a conversation on it.
I'm giggling at the chat.
But how many of our subscribers and listeners who have young children, how many of them are investing in a Stasic bike versus a KTM e-bike or a Husky e-bike? And will their next transition, will it go to a combustion 65 or a combustion 85? Like, what's that next step of transition? Because my frustration as a performance coach is when you have parents who come off of like Cobras and the bikes that have the centrifugal clutch, and then they go to a clutch and a gear shifter, the kid actually just goes backwards because they're just used to twist a throttle and it goes. Well, can you imagine transitioning from an e-bike to a combustion bike with a clutch and a gear shifter? I just see that being, again, if I'm just thinking in the future and the development of your athlete, that can frustrate the living shit out of him. And then
No, you
it'd
make
be
a.
interesting.
Oh gosh, they're talking to me. I mean, I'll do a poll on my channel for the community forum here, and I guarantee you, I know it's going to be overwhelmingly fossil fuels versus the electric stuff. But my point is the same thing as the how this conversation started with the frustrations and what is changing. I see in the future, I see what is changing, and just like what you said, my daughter, she's got a Stasic. Am I going to go buy a 65 for her that's shifter? No. I'm going to buy the easier to handle, easier maintenance on me, the KTM 50 that's electric, that has like the seat height that's adjustable for her. And then boom, what are we going to move to? We're going to move to the 85 electric bike and then go from there. And that's
Who
just how it is.
who makes an 85 electric bike?
Nobody.
Okay,
But I'm talking about
I'm
by the
asking.
time.
I thought I missed it. That's the only reason why I'm asking.
No. But by the time, there is one company out there in California. We're talking about people that want to advertise for free on stuff. I've been hit up a few times about the hybrid Alta 150 stuff. It's a cool bike, but anyway, I digress. It's the changing of the guard, and it doesn't happen with the people like myself that are exiting the sport. As far as I'm going from like a racer to an enthusiast.
Mhm.
And a lot of my friends too, they've bought e-bikes for their kids, but then they have the same argument with you, coach, where my buddy sees that I have an electric truck and he's like, oh, fuck an electric truck, I'm never going to do that. But then he buys both of his kids electric little dirt bikes, and now he's trying to convince me, let's go buy some electric bicycles, and I'm like, dude, it's $9,000. I'm going to go invest in Ethereum and Bitcoin for the $9,000, and we'll do that later, but anyway, it's funny. It's the narrative that's out there. And the narrative right now is that e-bikes suck and it's going to kill the sport. But in reality, it's what's going to give fuel to the sport. No pun intended.
But think about the development of the rider. If you look at some of these centrifugal, I'm going to go back to the Cobra, right? You crack the throttle on that thing and those things accelerate like a rocket. Now take that jump from a Cobra to a bike that you have to use a clutch and a gear shifter. How much do they have to shift to get that bike to accelerate the way that they're acclimated to? And that's where I feel like I don't want to use the word in a derogatory way, but what a disservice for the child, because where their fun factor, and especially as they start to get very proficient, then they have to make a huge regression, because now they're like, I got to coordinate all this kind of stuff. Where if you have your young athlete at a very early age, like, and I've talked about this at performance camps, and it's no fault of the parents. You've got a young athlete, and if he or she shows any kind of ability, what's available on the market to be competitive? Well, you have a P-dub, and then boom, you go right to a Cobra, or you go to the YZ65, or you go, to the KTM 65 Husky. Then boom, you got to jump from there. If you throw electric in there, what does that landscape look like when you're looking at the development of a rider? It's hard, because you've got to think about, and I teach this at my performance camps all the time. As soon as the bike doesn't get input from either the motor pushing or the brakes decelerating, you essentially have a weeble wobble on your hand. And that's what a P-dub looks like, right? You go and you watch them over there in the field riding, or on a little P-dub track. They're like a bunch of weeble wobbles, because they're on the gas, off the gas, on the gas, off. So they're just constantly weebling and wobbling. Now you throw the electric in there, where all you've got to do is twist the throttle and it's always there. Now you're asking them to give gas, clutch, and change the gearing. I've just seen a high level of frustration.
Yeah, but it's that's not going to happen. They're going to, like,
Right.
the new KTM e-bikes or whatnot are going to almost kill the Cobras, because they're going to be the Starks of them. They're going to be just as fast.
Which is perfectly fine, as long as they keep the classes isolated. E-bike class, a combustion class. And I think this again goes back to options. I think as long as, and it's difficult because the promoters are going to get a lot of pressure from the OEMs to squeeze people into what's being produced. And that is where I think is a little bit of a shame, because I don't think a parent should be forced to buy. I mean, I'm just guessing here based on what we're seeing on the price point of the electric bikes now. I can't imagine that an 85 e-bike is going to be less expensive than a combustible 85 two-stroke. But a parent's going to be forced to buy it now because they're all in the same class. That's bullshit.
Yeah, and that's where we're getting with the problem with stuff. But that's the bigger question is to ask is, you might not buy one for yourself, but do you see your kids buying them? Do you see your kids buying them for their kids? That whole.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because my oldest son is more into it than my younger son, but my oldest son is like cold day in hell before he'll ever buy an e-bike. But that's because he loves the smell. He loves the sound. He loves the work on the bike. That's what I hate to say it, and I think
his narrative.
Well, I'd like to see with the chat room, because I'm 55 years old. So I grew up with my dad in the garage, tearing apart two-strokes. You know what I mean? I miss that. And when my boys when they were growing up, we would go around, when you have trash day, we would go out and we'd find lawnmowers that people had discarded and they were going to throw out. And we'd bring them back to the house, and I'd lay all the tools out. I'd say, take it apart. So they learned what a 10 centimeter was, 10 millimeter. They learned how to use ratchet sets, open end, and we'd take that entire lawnmower apart, and then they'd try to put it back together. And to me, that was an easy way for them to learn math. And that was a way for them to get to understand just a little bit more about the mechanic side of it. And then when we bought the dirt bikes, I let them work on their dirt bikes. We bought this, I know it sounds silly, but like on the TTR 110, we bought a pipe, and I said, all right, we got to try to make it fit. And of course, none of the bolts lined up. So we had to go and get in there and had to work on it. We still talk about that every year when we get together, because my boys are grown up and out of the house now. But when we get together and we talk about moto, they talk about when they, you know, I hope this doesn't come across sound like a mean parent, but like I had my kids put their own graphics on. I didn't care if it had bubbles. They had to realize that that shit's hard. If you just always walk up and you've got brand new graphics and plastics and you've never put on a set of plastics, you don't know how hard putting on graphics is. I think you should learn. And yeah, your plastics have bubbles in them, but you put them on.
Oh, the chat room. No, but
Uh-oh.
the my point is again, it's just the sheer resistant to change. And people love the quick shifts on the new KTMs and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And people argue with the e-bikes that it's taking the skill out of it. And I'm like, well, okay, here's just a small iteration of now you don't need to use the clutch to shift. You can just yank as far as let the electronics do it. The whole traction control on the start stuff, let that do it. Before that, it was mechanical advancements with the whole shot buttons and whatnot. You know, this is just an iteration into the evolution that if you don't, unfortunately, start accepting it, you're going to get left behind. And that's my point, is we're at the start of the acceptance of stuff. Yes. Is there a probability that they're going to die out because nobody will buy them? Yeah. But there's also a market that people don't see. Just like I said, if you are growing, like, look at the people that are resistant to the e-bikes, Coach, just like you. You
Yeah.
grew up on two strokes. Your entire racing was two strokes.
Yep.
No wonder why you are biased and love two strokes.
Exactly.
The electric cars. Why do you love the big block V8s and whatnot? Because what was in the 70s and everything, it was all these.
Trans Ams, Mustangs.
Yes,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Mhm.
But now look at my generation, where I'm coming from somebody that transitioned from two strokes to four strokes, and now I'm seeing the evolution of the e-bikes. My daughter and them, it starts with them. It does not start with the older generation.
Right.
The lack of the term, the manipulation or the narrative swinging starts with the people that are more susceptible to change, and that is the youth. And
Let
that
me
is
ask
what's
you
happening.
let me ask you this, if you don't mind me asking. You and I don't think the subscribers, well, if they've watched your how-to videos, they know that you can haul ass on a motorcycle. I mean, since you started your show and you started your channel, you started with a lot of how-to videos. I would encourage everybody to go back and watch those. I think
They're
you'd be
still my
blown away.
most viewed videos is the
Yeah, but I don't know that people really understand how fast you are on a dirt bike. So here's my $1,000,000 question to you. Put all bias aside, you as a professional at a professional level racer, is there
youth.
anything that limits you on the e-bike, or do you feel like you can ride that bike as aggressive as you could a traditional combustion bike?
The e-bike is scary fast. It has so much more power. The only things I want from the e-bikes
Yeah.
to make them more fun is I want more traction control,
Okay.
because that bike is dangerously fast. And, you know, so there's needs to be a adjustability with limiting how much torque you get to that rear wheel at a specific time. And then, um, second is the gyro effect in the air with
Okay.
a four-stroke, and just where the weight ratio is with the motor sitting in the frame, the bike just feels more stable in the air with a traditional heavy dirt bike.
Okay.
Where the e-bike, again, with it just freewheel spin, it just feels like the RC deal. So you are more limited to try to scrub, and you don't feel as comfortable floating. And again, that's just an advancement when it comes to, let's get the tech, the R&D guys from Honda and everyone out there. How do we get this bike that has a completely different motor in it feel like a combustion motorcycle in the air? That's my biggest complaint. That is the only thing that's holding me back from just jumping on the bandwagon of the Stark. The Stark, and in every way, is superior than a traditional four-stroke and two-stroke motorcycle, even down to the maintenance, besides the battery life on that sucker.
So
And
let me put you on the spot. If you look at James Stewart bringing the Bubba Scrub in, and we all love that wonderful picture where, he's dragging a peg over that, he's literally, it's my favorite picture of all time. What do you think will be what will be the breakout through the e-bikes, what is something that we'll see on the e-bikes that the riders are able to do? Like you look at kids on 65s now, they can, for lack of better terminology, can scrub. What will be the breakthrough on an e-bike? What can you do on it that we can't see or do right now in a four-stroke consistently?
There's
As
the $1 billion question.
okay.
I would say the biggest thing that we're going to see with that is just the talent pool
Mhm.
exceed, is because there's going to be more competition, because more people are going to be able to enter the sport, which is going to be good. And with, it's the whole supply and demand thing.
Yeah.
When you've got more people in the sport, you've got more numbers, you got more eyeballs. Therefore, there's going to be more numbers, and there's going to be newer series. But hopefully, Supercross and motocross, they can keep their own series and just keep elevating it. Because if they're not going to, there's going to be somebody that shows up that has an arena cross type series and is going to make it just e-bikes, and people are going to eat it up.
Yeah. What I'm always amazed at this. I say this to Michaela every time I'm watching Supercross. That little kid that's in the KTM video on the e-bike when he's riding in the park, the skateboard park. Watch that video with a little bit more detail. That kid, what was he, 5 years old? He looks like he's been on a bike for 25 years. I think it goes right in line with what you're saying, because if he grew up on a Stasic and now he's on that KTM, more suspension, higher seat height and all that. I just said to Michaela, I go, that's not photoshopped. I mean, that's a little kid shredding on that little KTM e-bike. I think it goes in line with that's why I wanted to pick your brain at a pro level. And as fast as you are, is there anything that you could do on the
The
e-bike?
older I get, the faster I was, Coach.
No, I disagree. When you came out and joined me at Western, and I was just like in awe. I was like, my gosh. And again, we talked about this and have talked about it on the show here. It's amazing when you go out and you watch your local pro and you're like, nobody can go physically faster than that. And then you watch that local pro go to a national and he barely qualifies for top 40. You're like, my gosh, those guys are fast.
And the problem is that it's what a lot of people don't realize is it's opportunity cost with
Yeah.
that stuff. Is there's such a big gap between the whole 10,000 hour rule. Like, success happens when preparation meets opportunity. And a
Yep.
lot of these guys, Tomac and them, not gonna sit here and not say that they are a diamond in the rough, because they are, but
Mhm.
they also have mastered a craft by all the opportunities they've had for stuff, and then not to mention the equipment that they are on. A privateer, that's why, again, these whole e-bikes, I just see the solution that flickers with starting a new class, with making the privateers more profitable. That's the solution, is the e-bikes. That's one of the reasons why I'm so in love with them, Coach. And maybe I didn't even answer the question there.
Well, no, it's
But you're talking about the performance gap there, and I think it's got less to do with talent than it has to do with equipment and opportunity.
and that's why I was asking, because there's things that we talk about on a four-stroke. Like I think the consensus amongst the chat room would be a two-stroke. You have to learn how to keep it on the pipe. You have to maintain momentum. Where on a four-stroke, you can just grunt and punch it. You can be in third gear and just flip the clutch once, and it'll pull in that low-end torque side of things. That was a huge revelation for a lot of people, and people like myself. I'm 55, soon to be 56 next month. We call that a lazy man's bike. But now you look at how fast and what these kids can do on these four strokes. I've never ridden an e-bike. I can't even imagine. But when I watch the Hill brothers and I watch these guys shred on these e-bikes, I'm like, wow, what's going to be the new thing that breaks out of that, quote unquote, what you can do on an e-bike that you can't do on a four stroke, kind of like what you can do on a four stroke that you couldn't do on a two stroke. But the one thing that I want to make sure that everybody gets out of our show today, Johnny, is going back to the verticals of discussion. See, I think if you're talking about growing the sport, and then you let that conversation kind of bleed into the subject of the cost of racing, and then you look at, okay, the impact on the environment and the ability to be able to race them, and the cost. Now it's like we're against, which we're not. We're not against advancements in technology. We're not against the evolution of the sport and all that goes with it. But if we keep them as separate conversations, I don't think a parent should be forced into a more expensive way of riding and racing. If like for you, you're a techno geek, you love those new advancements. You're the guy that has to have the
And
newest and
truthfully, I
latest.
feel like it's making cost lower. Maybe not upfront, but
Yeah.
eventually that's the
Well,
road it's going
it's
in.
economies of scale, right? I mean, if you look at when Doug Henry came out with that 400F, can you imagine what the cost of building that bike was versus what we're able to buy now? Of course, economies of scale always works to our advantage, but I want to make sure that our listeners and subscribers don't get frustrated when we're talking about the growth of the sport versus the cost of the sport versus level, having separate class. Those are all different topics of conversation with the idea of raising the all tides for all boats. And that's why I'm so intrigued. I've never ridden the e-bike, but I've also never gone as fast on a motorcycle as I've seen you go. So for me, I want to talk to somebody that's at your level. What do you see that's coming down that technology road that can actually be utilized? Because that's all I've ever heard is people say, "Oh, we got to almost detune the e-bike," the same way that we hear some of these factory guys like, "The bike is so damn fast. I need it to be slower. It's unmanageable." Those are types of conversations that we used to hear. Stop and
And
think about that.
the biggest thing is it's just opening up doors
Yes.
to the growth of the sport, to new classes of the sport, to new racing series up the sport, to just new people, guys that are mountain bike guys getting in, and cyclist guys that are getting in, just changing. I kind of want to end with one of the questions from Lit Pro, and
Okay.
we know I'm biased on this matter. But I want your opinion. Lit Pro says, big question, theoretically, how long do amateurs need to be on e-bikes before e-bikes are raced in super motocross?
I don't know if I lost you there. Say that again, buddy.
Oh. So Lit Pro says, how long do amateurs need to be on e-bikes before e-bikes are raced in super motocross?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I apologize.
So how I'm putting it is like, when are they legal in the professional ranks? And I think they're legal in the professional ranks once every manufacturer has an e-bike available for purchase, and the consumers are buying the hell out of them to where now there's a need to have a professional series for them.
But are you saying that they can race against the combustible bikes?
So
Because
let's just
that's my big question. I have no problem with them having their own class. I have zero problem with them. I just think they need to be in their own class, just like I think two-stroke should be in their own class and four-stroke should be in their own class. It's to me, and again, Johnny, if I'm coming across as condescending, call me out. Why is that such a hard concept? Leave four strokes and four strokes, leave two strokes and two strokes, and leave e-bikes and e-bikes, and then I'd love to see all three classes be filled to the gills with shitload of bikes
But
on the
see,
gate.
stuff needs to kind of get revamped from the ground up, because the more convoluted you make stuff,
Yeah.
the more it's harder to market. It's harder to have retention. It's harder to just sell it to people. And as of right now, the huge thing that is going wrong with amateur motocross is the just so many freaking classes. And if we were to add more classes to it, well, now it's just an even longer day. We need to have less stuff.
No, I
And
apologize. Maybe I said that incorrectly. I don't think there should be 11 85 classes. I don't think there should be 11 250, because it's amazing to me when you hear super mini 12 to 13 senior, super mini 12 to 14 junior, 12 to 13 senior stock limited. For Christ's sake, it's an 85 bike. Now you got a big wheel, small wheel. Is it mini senior? It's 12 to 15. It's 13 to 16. It's A, B, C, it's D. I don't want that to come across as negative. Just working with as many amateurs as I work with, the parents are so confused because literally they have to wait for the rule book to come out to decide what they're going to buy and what classes they're going to try to race, because every year there's new classes, which goes back to what you're saying, Johnny. Instead of complicating and convoluting it, why don't we simplify it by saying we have an 85, and I'm just paraphrasing for the sake of time. You have an 85 stock class, you have an 85 mod class. Yeah, I understand you might want to put some age groups on there, but there's too many options. And then to layer in an e-bike class would be very simple. Let's just say we have a stock and a mod 85 class, we have a stock and a mod 125 class, we have a stock and a mod, when I say 125 two-stroke, a stock and a mod 250 two-stroke, and then a 450 or 250 four-stroke stock, or limit, I guess they call it limited and mod, 450 stock and mod, and then an e-bike class. And then do it. I think you were saying they can control the ECU as to what the output is.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's just say we have 10, I forgot the 65s and 50s, but you know what I'm saying? Essentially,
Yeah.
every size bike has essentially 2 classes, a stock and a mod, and maybe a few age groups like on the 85 where there's a little bit of but I think there's 53 classes right now at an amateur national.
As soon as they started going age group stuff, that's where I think we went wrong on stuff. Is I
Yeah.
was born or was racing when you had an 85, you just had a C, B, and A class.
That's right.
And you could be 16 years old on a 85 racing
Yep.
the novice class, and then you had the 11-year-old winning the A class kind of a
Yeah.
deal.
Yep.
Like I like that, where it was more so about just weight classes per se with the motorcycle rather than all this age group conundrum. But then somebody figured out that you can make more money by having age group, and I really would like to see somebody come along, because that's what off-road is doing so good right now. Is
Yes.
off-road is not going, here's my age group, here's it's like, here's a 2-hour race that you either race at 8 in the morning and you're done by noon, or vice versa. But the whole new local stuff is, truthfully, I can't stand going to local races right now, because you have to wake up at 5. I'm not trying to be negative. I
No,
see the need for
you are
change. I
not
see
being
the need
negative
for
at all.
change, that it's, let's go to A, B, and C
Well,
on.
to your point, here's what's sad. I talk to amateurs all day, every week, right? The parents will go to the races and they'll leave before the second motos. They're like, we can't sit here for another 5 hours to do a 9-minute moto. To your point, exactly what you're saying. So for the people that say we're being negative, we're not. We're just talking about real world situations. And so what's ended up happening is parents are disenchanted to go riding and race, or to go racing on the weekends. And this is where we get into some of the sensitive subjects. It's not that the parents don't want to support local races, but there's so many classes and you have to be there for so long to get your motos in, that after 2 days of a local race, or being there for 1 day, or if it's a 2-day race, the cost benefit just isn't there for the parents anymore, especially if they have to get to work on Monday morning. So they bail out of there midday on Sunday. So that's why you see a lot of, positions and then a DNS and then a position and a DNS. Now, for me, if I was in the business of being a race promoter and I saw so many DNSs, isn't it our responsibility as a business owner to accommodate the demands and the request of the end consumer? But in our sport, like, you don't see a baseball player show up and play the first 4 innings and then bail. But yet, if I was a promoter and I saw all these DNSs on the second half of the day, but unfortunately, they got their money. They don't give a shit if somebody doesn't race the second moto of the day. And if you look at the way that MX Sports gets their money, if it's an area or a regional, a $60 entry, $20 goes to MX Sports, whether you finish the second moto or not. So now we're just following the cash flow a little bit more. Now we come back to the idea of, you're a parent who's spending money to go ride and race. Are you really enjoying are you getting enough ROI on the money you're putting in? Because if you're not, what are you going to do? You're going to go do something else.
Well, and see, that's what I think we're just waiting for somebody to do. Here's a new series. Here's a new amateur series where here's the classes and blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
And that's, we see a problem. There's a solution to fix it. And maybe I need to make some more posts on as far as community polls.
Yeah.
On what's their biggest harp with amateur racing, because you need to know what the problem is. It's like a comment box, so.
But
Anyway.
what frustrates me though is, and if you look at the chat room right now, $100 an entire day for 8 minutes on your bike. So I guess the problem that I have with it though, Johnny, is you have the consumers voicing their frustration, and then the consumers run out, and we still could. I'm not going to name the race. I cannot tell you, every year there's 2 particular races that people will bitch up a storm about. And then as soon as the race is over, they'll immediately sign up for next year. And I'm like, why do you keep going back? Because to me, that's the problem, right? The only way that you can voice your discontent is to not support what you don't agree with.
It's with your checkbook, right?
Absolutely.
And that was starting off with, I'm talking about the demographic of what the moto community is, as far as with the privateers and whatnot. Like, people can complain about money all they want, but as soon as they still show up to the races,
Yes.
you know?
But now think about how dangerous that is. Because if we're talking about it from an economic standpoint, you have disenchanted individuals that don't, and I love what was said here in the chat room. So thank you for engaging with us, guys. You go and you spend $100 and you spend literally 10 to 12 hours at the track. How many more times are you going to do that before you finally go, you know what? Like Salty BMXer in here says, that's what got us into BMX. And excuse me, actually Logan Miles of BMX said that's what drove him into the BMX side. And that's exactly what my dad did, is he took me out of moto because he's like, I can buy one bike. It lasts 3 or 4 years and we can go on a Saturday night. We show up at 6, practice starts. We're done by 9 o'clock at night. This is where we have to constantly ask ourselves, if we want the sport to grow, and Johnny, we can even sum up this whole show here today. If we want the sport to grow, and I know I got accused of being very negative on our last show together. If you want the sport to grow, decrease the cost, which allows people to invest more into the sport. It's just simple economics 101. Because
how do you make it more fun? How do you make it more fun and have retention?
Well,
right?
I think we just spent 10 minutes talking about it. When I go to the track, I want to ride my dirt bike. So if I'm getting less and less time on the track, I mean, even on practice days, it's bad enough as it is.
Interrupting you here. I know, dude, this is the longest podcast we've had so far.
It's good.
And our guests bailed.
It's good.
That's part of my frustration is, like I said, just people being up on point on stuff.
If you say you're going to do something, simply do it. And sometimes that's why I gave you the courteous text last week. I was like, man, I've done everything I could possibly. Stuff happens. I understand that, but at least communicate with you. You didn't even hear from anybody.
Yeah, I completely understand that. But here, I started to just go to Saturday practice at the local races because I could spend $20 and I could ride 4 times and spend an hour and a half on my dirt bike and then not race on Sunday, because I would do 4 motos, 450 Pro and Open Pro. One would be in the morning and I would have 20 minutes in the morning, and then 2 motos would be in the afternoon. And I would get out of the zone and it was hard to get back into the zone. And, I was there all day for 30 minutes on my dirt bike, when on Saturday I could ride twice as much. And then what did the series, the local stuff, and all tracks do this now, is if you're going to go practice on the day before the race, you got to buy a wristband for the next day, because so many people are deciding to leave and not race. And that just proves the problem right there.
But it just goes to show you they're at least cognizant of the problem. But as long as the problem can be reconciled by you being forced, keyword, to buy for tomorrow, now you're put into a predicament. You may not go either Saturday nor pay for Sunday. So would you rather get a little bit of something or 100% of nothing?
With the promotion,
But when we're looking at the economics and wanting the sport to grow, would you rather have a little bit of something or 100% of nothing? And then when you step back, I think what we have forgotten as an industry is who's the consumer. This is what's been the demise of Ironman. This is what's been the demise of the endurance market as a whole. When the promoters get so big and they dictate what you're going to receive, and then you start feeling like you're being strong-armed, people will eventually go somewhere else. Now, what's interesting is the promoters are like, okay, well, as long as I still stay above this particular threshold of income, I don't care who I shit on, as long as I get that income. As soon as that income drops down, I'll give you a perfect example, and I'm not going to name the promoter, but out on the West Coast, there's a race promoter group out there. He said, nope, we're going to have X amount of classes. I think it's 12 classes. Everybody is getting a 20-minute moto, whether you're on a 65 or a 450 Pro Sport. Everybody gets a 20-minute moto, and we're limiting the amount of classes. And his event sold out like that. His entire series has sold out. Why? Because he's given the people what people are there to do. They want to ride their dirt bike. They don't want to be there all day. Now, what's interesting is I would rather go spend my money with somebody like that who listens to the end consumer, which brings our conversation all the way back around what you said earlier today. If you would like me to help you with products and services, then help me promote what my products and services are capable of. I will fulfill my obligation of the agreement and partnership. You do it, whether it's attending a podcast show or whether it's putting products and services in someone's hands. And here we are talking about growing the sport, right? You're choosing not, and this is where I get asked by parents all the time on the amateur side, hey, when you were riding, everybody talked about you needed gate drops. Some of the best, Carmichael, Stewart, these Chad Reeds, they're like, you guys, you don't race enough. You guys practice, but you don't race. And I understand that comment at a very superficial level, but if you're literally speaking with the parents who go, look, I just am not into, and I'm just going to reiterate what you said, Johnny, be at the track all day, get 2 motos in, but be gone, or as what was articulated in the chat room here, spend $100 and put 12 to 14 minutes on your dirt bike. Come on, man. At what point do you realize that's just not a good use of time and money? We all love to ride our dirt bikes, and we don't want to pay an arm and a leg to do so.
Yeah. So the chat is very conflicted yet again here, where you want paychecks or do you want growth? And those come hand in hand. The solution
Well,
is both the same.
that goes exactly to what we said about the YouTube environment. They're not taking the lion's share of the money. They're giving 60% back to the content creators. Content creators give people a reason to come to the platform. If you just can, that doesn't take a rocket science. If you can understand, pay the racers to show up, you're going to get better racing and you're going to have more people in the stands.
And coach, I see the transition of that happening. Again,
Yes,
it's the
I
same
agree.
with e-bikes, but it's also with this sport getting more professional, where it's eating out. Like I've had conversations with Davey Coombs and MX Sports and people, as far as guys like the privateers are dying.
Yeah.
And they assure me that that's not the case. However, when the entry is the Supercross Futures, only factory guys are going to be in there. And I see that that's a good thing. That is a good thing, because if you only have factory guys on the track, well, now you don't have to accommodate the privateers. And privateers, unfortunately, they make up the lion's share of the racing, right? But for some reason, they're willing to race for nothing. And that's what's mind-blowing to me, is that they're willing to pay for their pro license and pay to race and whatnot. And there's a disconnect there in some form. And we can talk about that on the next episode here, coach. But I know we've been going over for 2 hours.
Just real quick, in Cliff Note version, when you make the comment that the privateers are dying and they're saying that they're not, what are they using as an example that the privateers are not dying?
Well, just that they're still able to race is the whole consensus, is that they're still able to sign up. But I just foreshadowing, I'm seeing when these guys are all over 30 years old and the Supercross Futures is like the 250 class is now full of no privateers anymore, because everyone that got their pro license is a little factory kid. Well, now their careers are going to transition to the 450 class. And then now the whole field is full of amateur backed factory kids, rather than anybody that just works a 9 to 5 and shows up with their privateer bike. Like it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that's the influx of what's happening.
Yeah, see, I have to politely disagree, because if we had 150 people that were trying to qualify, then I would agree with the idea that the privateer foundation is growing. But when you see literally you have quote unquote qualifying sessions that have 12 people out there, again, not reiterating what you just said, doesn't take a rocket scientist to start looking at the numbers and go, the proliferation of the privateer platform is not growing. Because all you've got to do, I mean,
So you agree with me on it?
100%. But that's why I'm
Yeah.
confused where a promoter can say that that's not true. I am all ears to any
As of right
promoter.
now, like in the
But-
short term, it is not. But
Right.
what I'm saying is the next 5 years, it's going to be difficult
But
to have your pro license. Because
it's
like
going to get more difficult. That's why I'm a little bit confused. If right
in the 90s
now,
and 2000s and maybe even early 2000s, that's when the privateer was at his all-time peak, because
Mhm.
you didn't have these qualifying races to get your pro license. You basically just had to say, hey, I'm fast enough to race pro. Give me my Supercross and pro license, and boom, that's when
But you also had race contingencies that were very, very good. So if anybody who's been in the sport for a long period of time stops and thinks about what we've been saying on the show, you have less and less contingency money. Bike prices are going up. You have less and less people that are signing up for the races. I mean, you can go online right here, right now, live during the show and go look at the quote unquote provisional entry list. And if you go and you compare that to 2 or 3 years ago, that list is not bigger.
Well, and I'm telling you, for Hangtown, I just am speculating that we're probably going to have 80 riders try to race the nationals. Truthfully, it's funny that I'm saying that after what happened last year at the nationals, where that was the most privateer filled series
But that's
of
not
the
a
last
fair
10
but
years.
but that's not a fair statement. You're in the epicenter of motocross in California.
Well, but
We're
that's
supposed to be amazed that there was more than 80 people, 80 pros in California?
but coach, that's where I'm contradicting myself as far as in the midterm, like in the present moment, the privateers
I
are
disagree. I
are
disagree. Look at the entry list when you're outside of California.
No, I know. It is smaller right now, but the rules have not changed yet,
Right.
right? So if you still want to race, boom. But with the integration of super motocross and them now going with supercross, there's a dynamic shift that the rules are going to convey to both series. To now you've got the combines and what's happening with the combines. Well, soon the combines are going to be linked to getting your MX license as well. And boom, now we have the same, like you can see the transition that's being set up. There's a setup going on in the
Yes.
sport.
Yeah. But if
Is
you
is
look at what does it take to get into the combine? It's an
you need
invite
to have
only.
a factory team again.
It's
Yeah.
an invite only. So
Yeah.
again, we're back to the idea that you've got an OEM that's saying to the promoters, you need to force this four-stroke into the class. You have to force this e-bike into the class. You have to force. Now all of a sudden, where does the next round of athletes come from that are going to fill up the stadium seats? This is where, again, if we're gonna be looking at the broad spectrum, problem, solution, I can't tell you over the last 10 years how many amateurs I've worked with that literally say, I can't get a definitive answer on how to get in my points. The races come, the races go. You might be able to go to, I had one individual that drove literally from Arizona to Minneapolis, and he got here on a Thursday only to find out that AZ Open was going to have points. He could have just stayed home, but because it wasn't spelled out, everything is just on a whim. Now, again, we're opening another conversation, but it's an interesting one because for the people that have been patient enough with us here for over 2 hours, I'm only sharing with you, and Johnny, you have the insight as well. I'm only sharing with you things that I'm seeing and hearing that are in the situation, not speculative, but actually in the situation.
Like, coach, even look at the Supercross 2 weeks
Mhm.
ago as
Yeah.
far as how many views that I get and stuff for pointing out the penalties and whatnot, and what was on the broadcast. The broadcast was showing you the point steal for doing this. And honestly, that's the first time I've seen
Yes.
live explanation of what was going on. And it has a lot to do with social media and people making it to where now you're forcing the transparency. And these conversations, like I said, are just going to force transparency, which
Exactly.
is awesome, But
Yep.
coach, I know you've got more family stuff you need to do with Michaela here. And I'm thank you, everybody. Thank you for the 2,000 people
Absolutely.
that joined us for 2 hours today.
Please hit the
People,
like button, man. Please hit the like button, guys. It helps Johnny, and Johnny's gonna get mad at me for saying this, and he's gonna yell at me when we hang up. He's working his ass off. Johnny, I say it every week. I can't thank you enough because there's a lot that goes into getting these things even spearheaded and put together. Please hit the like button. If you're new, please subscribe to Johnny's channel. Every one of those 52,000 that you see is because of Johnny's sweat equity. And I'm just going to say publicly, I'm proud of you, brother. You're kicking ass.
well, you're somewhat like a father figure to me, coach. So,
I appreciate that.
I thank you for being on the show. And
No.
dude, let's get him to 23,000. Everybody go subscribe right now and make sure you hang out for tomorrow. I'm going to do a live reaction show to the race, and then I'm going to go watch the UFC 300 because I want to see that as well.
Nice.
So anyway,
Nice.
join the party with me, and we'll see you next week. Till next time, keep WFO. We're all